and we should continue this fun. And we're throwing an evening event, so after this conference, come over to the Stack Realm office. We're on 8th and Brannon. We're going to have papalote tacos, beer, foosball, so you can chat with your peers, hang out with us, and have a good time.
And we'd like to encourage this to happen again, this kind of spontaneous parties. I don't know if any of you are also game developers. If you are, you know that GEC sort of started that way and people started doing parties at night. So next year, hopefully we'll have a little more time to get the parties out, or next biannual. So contact me if you want to do a party, and I'll help promote it for you as an aside to the conference. Okay. All right, so what we have here is a distinguished panel of experts from different fields and different companies, so that hopefully you can get a little bit of crosstalk, and then people talking about what is their particular specialty. So before we go forward, I would like you both all to introduce yourself just really briefly.
Sure. So my name is Ilya Grigorik. I work at Google. There's some feedback here. On the Make the Web Fast team. So we work on everything from helping optimize services within Google, helping specific teams within Google, and also just looking at tools for how to enable outside developers make faster apps.
Hi, I'm Vincent. I work at Adobe Systems. I work in a group called the Web Standards and Innovation Group, and we participate in specification work in Devil's 3C and also to WebKit development.
Hi, I'm Giorgio Sardo from Microsoft in Redmond. I work in the Windows Evangelist team, so I work closely with Windows and Internet Explorer team, and we work a lot on HTML5 application and trying to see and imagine what the future of the web and apps is going to look like.
I am Frank Greco, Director of Technology for Kazane Corporation. It's nice to be back again this year and see the conference grow. It seems like it's doubled. Our claim to fame is that we support the new web communication stack in HTML5, and we're innovating both above WebSocket and below WebSocket, which we'll get into later.
Hi everybody, I'm Peter Relan. Nice to see everybody again from last year. I run an incubator called UWeb, which has a number of companies that focus on mobile technologies, social games, including companies like OpenFaint, which was sold to Gree, CrowdStar, iSwifter, Spaceport, which is outside, Pluto Games, and a number of others. So nice to be here again.
All right, we have about 5 questions from different areas, and then if we have a little extra time, we can maybe take a couple from the audience if we're brave. And all right, so this one is really aimed towards you, which is, and I caught a little bit of your last talk where you went over things a bit, but I think everybody kind of expects that, okay, bandwidth is going to take care of us and all those sort of things, but you work on the Make the Web Faster initiative. I was wondering if you could just briefly explain what effect that would have, at least in your hopes and dreams, if any, on the typical user, or do we have to get our act together and get our websites simply faster and our applications faster?
So hopefully we'll be able to deliver, our group will be able to deliver some auto-magic improvements for everybody, right? That's part of the goal. So first of all, our audience. So our audience is both the developers and the end users, right? And there's a number of different projects. And I'll just give you guys a couple of examples of the kinds of things that we're working on to give you a feel for what our group is doing. The group is actually fairly large, many engineers across many different focus areas, and we look at the entire experience of a user. So for example, can we make optimizations in the TCP/IP stack to make the web pages or the video stream faster to you? And in fact, there are optimizations that we put together and put forward to IETF for things like, hey, we could increase the congestion window size, and that'll give us 15 to 20% improvement in loading time. hey, we can send extra data within the send packet. So there's things like that. Then we move up the stack and we look at things like, okay, so HTTP has been around for 10 years, it has served us well, but just within the last year and a half, we're starting to build this new breed of applications, which is, it lives almost entirely in a browser, and we're just making a lot of very small requests. And that sort of experience is actually not what HTTP was designed for. So we need, HTTP does have pipelining within, but that never got deployed for a variety of reasons. So let's come up with a new protocol. We have an initiative called Speedy, which is enabled in Chrome. So there's kind of low-level things like this, right? And so that's an example of something you would hopefully inherit as a user, and that'll also make your web pages faster as a developer. Then there are tools that we focus on just in terms of, hey, can we make the web browser faster? So Chrome is actually a very good example of us trying to apply a lot of the optimizations. And then finally, we actually have a fairly big effort for just trying to educate developers and build better tools for developers for how can you optimize the pages. So things like page speed, it's actually a family of products where you can type in your site and we can tell you a set of optimizations that you can apply on top to make your web page load faster. Or, now that we know what these rules are and we've applied them across many different sites, can we build a tool that will automatically speed up your website? So something like mod page speed. And the best thing about a lot of these initiatives is the code is open source, it's available, it's in WebKit, it's in other SDKs. So you can, there are actually companies that have took the PageSpeed product, the PageSpeed SDK, and built commercial products, web accelerators on top of that code base. And we encourage that kind of thing. So that's kind of a sample of the types of tools that we're building. And we're also working with W3C on specs like navigation timing and others. And this is basically coming from our own experience as web developers, where specific groups within Google come to us and say, hey, we have a regression suite, we have performance tests, but we deployed this code last month and it just got slow. We can't figure out what the heck is going on. Maybe it's the browser, maybe it's something else. Tell us, build us better tools. Tell us what we need to do. So that's the primary focus of the team.
Can I add a bit on this? Yeah. I watched actually the session from Ilya. I think it was great. And Ilya liked a lot of things, and in particular, I would like to re-emphasize the last point. There is a new working group at W3C. It's called Web Performance APIs, and it does only that. It does only look into APIs that user agent need to implement in order to allow you to profile your application. So things like navigation timing, resource timing, you have animation frame, request animation frame. There is a set immediate. There are a lot of new APIs that have a zero cost from a JavaScript perspective because they're implemented low level.
Closer.
And so I invite you to look at the W3C Web Performance API group and just check out the progress there. And then there was a little note on one of your slides, and it said, all of these APIs are available, you're just not using them. And actually, I blame myself also on this because we go so quickly sometimes that we release APIs, but then we forgot that they are there and we don't use them. So it can take some time to learn, but now hopefully you're more aware of the fact that there are things that the browser can help you with today, and you can already use them. And it's good to see also Google Analytics being on top of that. Internet Explorer, Microsoft and Google are actually co-chairing the working group, so we are both heavily involved in this.
Great, and maybe towards the end you can talk about what you might see impact for the typical user from that, maybe a year or 5 years from now, but that'll be at the end. Okay, so here's an area that I'm totally confused on, and I'll admit it. And from somebody who comes from a game development background, and any of you out there who do graphics and things like that, I would love to hear any comments on the 3D technologies. I mean, if I want to think about a mess on the web right now, I think about 3D technologies, where we have WebGL, which doesn't work on phones and isn't supported by all the browsers, and then, but we've got some new interesting technologies such as shaders. We've got CSS3. Anybody got any predictions about where that mess is going to go? Are we all going to have to use third-party products, or what?
Is this working? Okay.
Well, I don't have predictions on where things would go. I think they're kind of separate efforts with different goals. The way
Can you hear him?
Can you hear me? All right. Not in the back if you can. So the way I think about it, I think WebGL is more targeted. You take over the canvas and it's embedded in the web, but it's kind of its own world. It's an imperative API. It's kind of disconnected from CSS and the DOM. So it's been very successful for people trying to start doing games, and there are some interoperability problems. Whereas things like shaders, CSS shaders, or CSS transforms, 3D transforms, are more integrated into CSS and web pages. So they serve kind of different purposes, I think. So I don't think you would write Quake in with CSS transform or shaders. You would probably look at something like WebGL. So I think there are two trends. That's what my point is. One trend is try to enhance the current model, the rendering capabilities of the web with 3D transforms and things like shaders, which borrow from 3D technologies. And then there's a full-on canvas 3D context, which is if all you do is a 3D world and it's kind of embedded in the page, but it's its own thing, then we can use WebGL. And the separate question you have is, I think, on the adoption, and that's related to security concerns and implementation concerns of some of the implementers. My understanding is that some other vendors have been comfortable releasing WebGL, and some others haven't because of the end service attacks or timing attacks that exist. And I can't comment for me. Well, he's not the only browser that has not shipped the WebGL.
Yeah,
Actually, I like your differentiation. So building on top of Vincent, like options. How many of you in this room need or are using today WebGL? 1, 2, 3. How many of you need like 3D transform or being able to apply 3D transform to DOM elements or SVG using CSS? Okay, more. But still, most of you didn't raise their hands. And so this is actually something that we also need to look at, right? I think it's obvious that 3D is an exciting space. It's for everyone, right? For game developers, but also for just web developers, for app developers. There are so many scenarios can be built. I don't know if WebGL is the right answer, but what I think is that a lot of time we think about technology, but I'm quoting my CDP this time. Some time ago I say it's not just about implementing a feature, it's about making it right. And making it right means that it's not just there in past the HTML5DevConf website, but it's actually something useful that developers can rely on. And I was listening this morning at the talk from Ben about the perf benchmark. Thank you, perf marks. And I was surprised to see that WebGL actually is not even running on Chrome for Android on this latest Samsung S Galaxy 2, I don't know. And I think we need to keep this in mind, right? It's about enabling developers, not just about creating niche environments that are specific to one vendor. So there is more work that we need to do on our side to make sure that we come up with a strong solution that works for everyone, and then we can rely on it stronger term.
Okay, so this next one's a little more general, and I hope to get kind of a quick answer from all of you on there. We've heard a lot about these new technologies. Some of them are more evolutionary than revolutionary. HTML5, CSS3, SVG, all the JavaScript and slurry technologies. In a year, and even maybe 2 years, are we just going to see slow improvements, or does anybody see things more radically changing on that and the impact from it? Nobody wants to talk that.
Sure. I mean, we're at the start of the next big wave of the web, right? So this isn't just HTML4 +1, but we all know that from all the talks that we've heard. It's going to take a while for the light bulb to go off, right? We're going to kind of use like offline persistence and the canvas and WebGL and the WebSocket, and we're going to use it in the same way we've been using stuff for the past 15 years. And then one day the light bulbs will go off and say, hey, we can do something else with it. And that's when the HTML5 will take off. And I think actually we're not quite there yet. We're still looking at HTML5 as if it's HTML4+1. We can't do that. We have to look at it, take offline persistence, take Canvas, take WebSocket especially, take that now, extrapolate that to applications, right? Think about something different. We're all thinking about it as if it's the same old thing. It's not. This is a brand new way to program for the web.
Why isn't it the same old thing, just better?
Why isn't it the same old way? Well, and certainly from all the talks we've heard today and some of the other HTML5 conferences, there's different ways now of getting to your user, right? There's more interactivity, right? There's way more interactivity. I mean, just take, for example, like that's something that's near and dear to my heart is WebSocket. So people look at WebSocket, oh, we can push data to the browser. I said, yeah, we did that 10 years ago, right? But people are looking at that. And you can send things back from like an iPhone back to the server over the same connection, right? You can control things. You can watch mouse movements. You can monitor mouse movements in real time over the web now for all your users. So you have to think of things differently, right? It's not just the same old stuff. And I think, as I said, the light bulb hasn't gone off yet. And one day it's going to go off in your head, and you can say, wow, we can do all kinds of really cool shit with this stuff. And that's when the web will change.
Okay. So I think I'll just talk about the graphical side of the web. I think the web is going to be very different in the next couple of years because both the implementations have already improved. I mean, there's a ton of work that's been going on hardware accelerating browsers for 2D graphics and now 3D graphics. And I expect new capability, like SVG's been very long in the making, but with high DPI screens, etc. I think vector graphics are going to be even more important than they have in the past. And new features, like Giorgio was saying earlier about, do you need 3D? The way I look at the new features is I think they're enhancements. So there was a chasm before between like the 2D world and the 3D world, and I think that's going to probably change a little bit. Where we're going to look at effects we want on pages, and where that uses 2D or 3D technology is not very relevant. We want the nice effects for the pages, and I think this is coming with like obviously CSS shaders, 3D transforms, compositing and blending coming to the web. I think these will enhance the web in ways that we haven't seen before, because a lot of what's been on the web so far has been things that have been seen commonly in other places before, and I think we're reaching a point where the web is going way beyond what was available on other platforms before.
Just to add one point, I agree with both my colleagues, but I don't agree when you say the web, HTML5 is a new web that is different from what we had before. I agree that we can create different applications, but the thing is exactly what we had before, plus a tons of new features that don't break what we had before, and that's one of the principles, right, of HTML5. And I think that as we continue to add features, our intention is not to come one day to you developers saying, hey, you remember what we discussed in 2012 at HTML5DevConf? Yeah, it's old, forget it, implement HTML6 is better and cooler, right? I don't expect we will get there, at least. I hope also on the other side of the table we're not going to reinvent new languages or try to do new things, but the goal here is to keep building on top of what we already have, and of course make improvements, and of course get to the next level of JavaScript, ECMAScript 6, and make it object-oriented and allow proxy. I was talking with some of you this morning about this. Of course we're going to have more features in the browsers, but what we already have today, that's where I agree that we have so many new things that not a lot of us are still using in terms of offline, database, sockets, and I think there is much more that we can build there.
Okay, that's interesting. So we had 2 that didn't comment, and the 3 that did seem to think that, all right, this is not just same old, we are really going to see some interesting thoughts out there come from the technology, and we don't know exactly what they are, because anytime you give people new tools, they create things that you do not expect. And possibly, especially from the server side, things have changed. I just want to know if we can go back to HTML and if we can go back to the look of the late 1990s and animated GIFs. Well, now it's cooler because it's HTML5. All right. Okay, 2D technologies. Any comments on that? I mean, once upon a time we saw Flash kind of dominate that, and is it possible we'll see something like that again? Emergence of HTML5, or do you think we're going to see fragmentation for quite some time? This could be a quick answer from people, and maybe we don't know, but obviously Adobe would have the most, most insight on that one.
Okay.
And Peter.
Okay. So on 2D, I think we have great foundation right now with both Canvas 2D and SVG, because they serve different purposes. One is an imperative API, which lets you take over an array of pixels and do whatever you want with those pixels. With the pros and cons, meaning that you don't have the weight of the DOM on one hand. On the other hand, you don't have the DOM, meaning that you don't have the interactivity and all the nice features that come with the DOM. And SVG provides a declarative model, which is easily toolable. Lets you bring in like data from like say Illustrator or Inkscape, tools like this. So we have a really good foundation on top, and I think that's typical of the web. And then on top of this, what I expect to see is frameworks, and then I think the jury's out to what framework is going to be prevalent, right? And I personally I don't expect one. I see wonderful work like D3.js, for example, for visualization, which is an awesome framework for visualization, and people start using it for other things, but it's really made for visualizations. There's things like Easel.js and other frameworks that are either using Canvas or SVG as an underpinning. Raphael.js is another one that's using SVG. So I think there's lots of different needs and things people do on the website. I don't expect one single solution, but multiple frameworks to emerge based on that common platform that has, and I think that's what it should be, it has kind of the low-level raw capability we need.
Peter, did you have any comments? Coming from your end?
Yeah, speaking of frameworks, I mean, obviously, one of our companies is in fact focused on that. I do think that for the game, in particular the game development community, for app development, the 2D tech may not be nearly as important as for the game development community. We know that if you look at Adobe, which dominated it for a long time, still does on the Flash platform, the three main uses are, if I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but video, premium advertising, and games. The three big killer apps for the Flash tech, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at video, I would say it's fast moving to HTML5 without necessarily much help for 2D technology. If you look at premium ads, I think there is also probably a pretty good case to be made that HTML5 Canvas can suffice. So ultimately, it's a killer app for games, and that's where these frameworks that will come up will define or not define. So I know that something like Cocos 2D is a framework that's used a lot by game developers on the native side. So on HTML5, I would expect actually quite a bit of activity this year, in the next 12 months, in the framework space.
It's easy to see this pattern. Just look around yourself in the lounge, right? I think there are 3 different frameworks, guys that are just coming with different proposals. And I was actually looking and talking with each of them. I think they're having great ideas and they're discovering new things to do stuff. And the great thing I think is that the platform allows the basic low-level APIs, and then they go back and build like not only a framework, but also an engine or rebuild Flash assets into HTML5 or vice versa. So it's quite actually interesting to see the dynamics in space.
Okay, I'm going to actually skip to question 6 here, which you've seen, because they all got to look at the questions a bit beforehand. But one, and then we'll go back to app stores. But one prediction from each of you for the next year and the next 5 years, and hopefully you go for your expertise. So that, I know we're putting you on the spot, but hey, you're experts, so I'm sure you have some biases and we want to hear them. I don't know if it's, I think that may have less echo than this one.
So the 1-year prediction and 5-year prediction, is this being recorded? So about web performance. So I think where we are today, the kind of whole performance characteristics of most web apps today kind of snuck up on us over the course of the last year and a half. We've shifted a ton of logic into the front end without necessarily thinking about what are the tools, what are the implications, how do we build a giant web app that's of significant size. You look at something like Gmail with whatever it is now, 400,000, 500,000 lines of JavaScript code. Those apps are in a class of its own right now on the web, but even that is not such a big web app, right? And I think over the course of the next 5 years, we'll find more developers, more companies just becoming more ambitious in terms of what's the size of an app that you can push to the web. I think Gmail is kind of one of the examples of an app that's pushing those boundaries today, but we know from working on Gmail that we need much, much better tools for that. And unfortunately, because of that, I think right now we're just going to keep piling more JavaScript includes, like, oh yeah, give me that shim, give me this polyfill, give me that, give me this, right? Just load all the resources that I can. I think it's going to get worse, but the reason I say it's going to get better is at the same time as I'm observing kind of this negative trend of like the sites are actually getting slower, I'm also seeing a lot more focus on web performance. You see stuff like HTML5 games, and I personally happen not to play too many games, but I love the fact that all of that work is going on there because I know that that sector will push web performance to its boundaries and it will make everything else faster, right? Because to build an HTML5 game, you need very good script loaders, very good resource loaders, you need better compression, you need better everything. So just like on the desktop, where games have pushed the boundaries of performance, it's going to happen on the web as well. One thing that I'm personally really, really excited about, and this is where my bias shows, is Speedy. So Speedy is enabled in Chrome. If you're using Chrome and using Google services, it's there. Twitter runs on Speedy now if you're using Chrome. But there is the IETF proposal for it now. Microsoft has submitted another proposal for that kind of builds and alters Speedy. So I think there's going to be a very good discussion for what is effectively HTTP 2.0, or will hopefully become 2.0. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting discussions just on that topic within the next year, and I sure hope that we take the pragmatic route to deploying this thing, and within the next 5 years for sure, it'll be there and it'll just magically, hopefully, make a lot of things faster.
Right, so more on the graphical and layout side. So I think in the next year, I expect all the browser vendors to put quite a bit of effort in all the layout technologies for CSS, like continue and nailing down like the CSS grid layout, CSS flexbox, hopefully CSS regions and CSS exclusions, and things that let you do much more advanced page layout. Because that's I think the core functionality seems to be really ripe for implementation. Longer term, I don't know if it's between 1 and 5 years. I think we'll see SVG and HTML, I think, blend a lot more than they have so far. I mean, there's been a separation between 2D graphics and HTML, which I think was a little artificial to some extent. So I expect those two things to come together. We see a lot of that happening with the FX task force in W3C, where the CSS working group and the SVG working group both work together on things that are common. And there are things like compositing and blending, which is common to SVG and CSS, filter effects, which are common to CSS and SVG. So I think in the next 5 years, what I expect is a lot more graphical abilities to come to the web and be implemented and be implemented well, because we already see that happening today.
Well, I hope you're right.
I see in the next, probably will take 5, maybe more years, websites becoming smarter. Today we have the expectation that we set like a URL, and we press enter, and we download all the resources, and we watch the content, and then we click another link, and we reload the resources, and we watch other content. I think in 5 years from now, our website will be so smart that I can start eventually watching my website. Then I go offline, and I'm still able to browse other content. Then I move from my desktop to my tablet, and I can continue to reuse the existing session. Or I can go to the phone and I have my same setting and links and cookies. And I'm always connected to the cloud with other users across devices. I can go offline, and then when I come back online, everything gets resynchronized again. And also the website, we had some session today about responsive design. It's great to see this, and there was also, I think, one talk about touch. Website very soon we start running, like you already have iPads, you already have tablet devices. We need to start thinking, how does the web look in a tablet device? Like, what does it mean if I touch the screen with 1 point, with 5 fingers, with 10 fingers? So touch will also become a very interesting new approach to access the content, and we need to design the application to take care of that. And I see this happening probably in the next few years.
Well, I think there's two things I'd like to point out that may happen. Of course, who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years. One thing is that everybody knows about the interest in APIs for servers, right? I think programmable web there's like 3,000 APIs for web servers out there, and they're primarily REST-based. And I think what we're going to find going forward, I think people are going to notice that once you have WebSocket, do you actually need REST? So I think people are going to start to take a look at that. Maybe you don't need REST. Maybe you can expose services from within your company, or maybe from a cloud to cloud service, that's more real-time, right? And so then, and also offering things like additional APIs on top of WebSocket, right? Think of WebSocket as like a TCP. Who programs at the TCP level right now? Maybe 40 years ago they did, right? And we invented abstraction and other APIs to sit on top, and we program at that level. So I think we'll see more and more APIs offered besides REST. So REST will be good for some things, but additional APIs be besides REST. And the second thing might be a little bit heresy for this room, but I think we need an alternative to JavaScript. And I know my colleague to my left, you're right, like that. But it's good we disagree, because it means one of us is not redundant. So that's good, especially in this job market. I really think in terms of, I come from, judging from the color of my hair, I come from an enterprise environment. I've been around for a while, and I know the response that enterprise managers get to JavaScript, and I know some of my colleagues are big JavaScript fans, and certainly the web design people. It's great for what it does, but for the enterprise, it's not liked. Take my word for it, managers do not like JavaScript.
Can I I respectfully disagree. I agree that JavaScript, obviously I don't have the experience that probably you have with enterprises. I feel like we never, we always had simple JavaScript, and now that we realize that we can actually write, like Google teaches, like millions of lines of JavaScript in one application, just like that, we realize that it's complex. And there is a learning curve like any other language. And so what I think we need is not reinventing the language, but improving the tools. I think tools will make a huge difference, and being able to have tools that not only give you intelligence and all this easy stuff, but also help you with catching error up front or doing type compilation. This sort of things will definitely help the development of complex applications. And I think JavaScript is not dead. JavaScript is evolving. There are actually Doug today left the conference this morning to go to a meeting in the Mozilla campus with all of the JavaScript committees, and we are there as well to discuss the next version of JavaScript. And there are things that will come that improve the language. Of course, it's going to take time, but hopefully we will not need to sit at this table discussing why the web broke and we need to rewrite it again. I don't want to do that.
Okay. All right.
So, judging by the color of my hair, I have a little more experience than him, a little less than him. So, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, camp, I think. But, I think that JavaScript, I want to pick up on that in the next year, the 1 year sort of outlook. I think that most developers are sort of coming to JavaScript and seeing the obvious issues of typing and classes and things that they love to do. So The question I think to ask is in the next year or two, as that particular language gets deployed, from an interoperability perspective, it's a great runtime engine because you can count on the browser supporting it. But to your point about tools, is it the right development environment? So it's a great runtime environment because once you deploy in JavaScript, you're confident that you've got all these browsers that support it. But I think most of the issues, there are some other issues in the runtime environment that people have issues with. One of them is security and obfuscation as well. I think we'll see tools to deal with that. But at the end of the day, there's I see a huge number of open source projects, and including I think Google's doing something as well. CoffeeScript, Haxi. There's a lot of people working on alternative development languages using JavaScript as a runtime language, and that's an increasingly popular trend that I think we'll see in the next year because there's nothing preventing that. We have the tools, the compilers, the parsing technology to convert from one to the other and get the best of both. So I actually think that we don't need to change JavaScript. Let's leave it as it is because the problem with interoperability is if the least common denominator is not the least, it's very difficult to have a common denominator. So if you make it the greatest common factor, then it's going to be very difficult to have interoperability. So you need this balance of a runtime that's really simplistic. JavaScript certainly has elements of that, but a development environment that is more sophisticated because it certainly is what a developer is. Runtime environment JavaScript, development will be done in other languages.
So maybe I'll just quickly jump on the bandwagon here. Personally, so this is just my own opinion, I would love to see more languages in the browser, just because I think it's good, right? We have a lot of languages that are on the server side that are available. I think that's a good thing. Now, whether
we had this language called VBScript some time ago. How many of we just deprecated it and we just removed it from browser? How many of you want it back? Because if it's a request, then I'll bring it back to the team. Right?
So no VBScript. We've standardized on that, but at Google we've taken literally every approach at writing a big web app. We have Gwt, which is, hey, let us write Java, which will then compile down to JavaScript. We have YouTube, that's written in Gwt, big web app. Okay, it has, it works, clearly, YouTube runs. It has its own downsides. We have Clojure. So we basically said, hey, we're not going to write this stuff in Java. Let us apply Java-esque things on top, basically decorate JavaScript with additional runtime or whatever checks or compilers, and let us go at this problem that way. We have Google Plus and other products which are actually built using Clojure. So that's another way. We also written just flat out JavaScript, Gmail, right? We have different teams competing on these different things, and we see problems in each and every area. And I think our experience shows that these big web apps, none of those approaches necessarily solve it. So I completely agree that
they all suck. Yeah.
Basically, yeah. There's a lot of room for improvement there. So we need much better development environments, especially as we think about building bigger and more just bigger web apps, right? So I'll just comment quickly on Dart. It's yet another way of us trying to tackle this problem. It's a technology preview right now. We're iterating incredibly actively on it. That team is changing the APIs like not even a weekly, on a daily basis. And I'll point out one example of something that JavaScript right now just can't solve. So the beautiful thing about web apps is there's no install process, right? You point your browser at it, it loads, beautiful. The problem with it is you're running an infinite install process, because every time you type in that URL, you have to download the damn script, you have to parse it, you'll get your optimized bytecode, you'll get your JIT from it. With Dart, we have this idea that we're playing with called snapshots, where we can actually freeze the bytecode and avoid the startup time. So for example, we know that parsing those 500, if you're trying to debug Gmail and you pull down a 500,000 line JavaScript file, I can tell you from experience that putting debug points in there like kills Chrome. It's incredibly painful to debug that thing. With something like snapshots, we can actually eliminate a 1 to 1.5 second startup time every time you load Gmail. That's a huge performance improvement. This is something that the Gmail team has looked at and tried to solve for a long time. They can't. There's nothing that the JavaScript runtime can do. There's nothing that the V8 can do to make that faster. So that's just one example of something where, even though JavaScript is a great runtime, you're absolutely right. In fact, we have Dart compiling to JavaScript as a target because we see that as a long-term goal. And that's not going to go away, but there are fundamental problems. So I think that there is a need for something else.
I'll put a short comment on this. I think there's a kind of a cultural issue with JavaScript where it's kind of cool to bash on it.
What cracks me up is it's been cool to bash on it for at least 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, yet it is still here.
But yeah, exactly. And I think there's also the approach that many of us, and I certainly have been in that camp, have taken when coming to JavaScript, is that you start with an adverse reaction because it's not what you expect. So you start with a new language that you kind of reluctantly have to use. It's like they made me use JavaScript and I hate it because, in my case I was coming from Java, which I really was happy with, and when I started with JavaScript, I really hated it because it didn't have what Java had. Well, it was not Java, basically. And that all changed when I started to use it for what it was and learn about it and learn what was good about it, and thank Doug for writing books about the good parts of JavaScript. But I think there's something about trying to embrace the language for what it is, and it does have really wonderful features. It's a dynamic language, it's scripted, etc. That makes it in some aspects superior to other languages than Java. I'm not saying it's superior in all aspects, but certainly in some. So I think there is a little bit of that cultural pushback of all of us who come from a different background and don't agree with what the language is, but that's what it is. And I think everybody's better served by trying to embrace it and use it in the best way. And also, I think there are great ideas, and certainly not perfect, but I think the right place to do this is to evolve the language. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in evolving the script.
So it sounds like the consensus, if there is one, is that it will either evolve and take care of some of the issues, or we will see alternatives.
It'll definitely be here in 5 years.
Well, I just from the standpoint of the conference, when we originally talked about naming it, there was an argument as to whether it was a JavaScript conference or HTML5, and I said, what the heck does HTML5 mean anyway? Everybody throws it in as this overarching garbage can, but it won because JavaScript is. It's too controversial, but I love JavaScript, and I love it for all the good and the not so good parts, and the fact that other people don't like it too, which is kind of fun, because I worked at enterprises too, and the worse engineer you were, the more closer you were to JavaScript. So I mean, I totally understand how that worked. But it's interesting to see that starting to flip and seeing that those technologies actually move into the server. So, okay, those are wonderful predictions for the future. And interestingly, I didn't even put that question on there, and yet that's the one everybody spent the most time on. So, okay, we have one more here with the app stores, and then if we have them, well, we don't. We're running out of time here, so I don't know about opening up to the audience. But one more on the app stores, and then a closing comment from Peter. So another area where it's hotly contested is we have app stores versus browsers to a certain extent. And the question right now is, will the app stores continue to kind of take more and more space, or will the pendulum swing back to browsers because all of a sudden iPads are a larger screen and they're more web browser friendly? And do the developers care if they can use HTML5 type of technologies in either? So, all right, it's ready. Giorgio wants to go.
So I think HTML5 is a good choice because there are great technologies. And I have to talk about PhoneGap. There are technologies like PhoneGap that let you use HTML5 whether you deploy it as an app or as a browser or just for browser access. And I think this is good because you can leverage your skills, your development skills in both environments. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to predict what the feature is. I think for a lot of apps, though, it is kind of true that the app is more of a bookmark on the phone or the tablet device you have than anything else. So the app itself can be done in HTML5, and there's no technology need for it. There are some apps where yes, you do need native capabilities, but I think those are more and more far between.
It's not hard to predict where the future is. It's in front of me. No, I think like the browser is not going anywhere anytime soon. This is the way I actually see it. I think the store will become more a different channel to distribute your applications. And you will see that as you start building complex applications that need requirements like camera or sending SMS or getting into the specific device of the contacts and the friends, you will start thinking about, okay, what's the privacy model? What's the security model? Or if you're building games, what's the monetization story? How can I monetize this? Add ads or make in-app transactions? And that's where probably the store will really help you. Not only to distribute, but to monetize it, to make it secure, and to reach an even broader audience. And that's why, obviously, we as I think everybody at this table agree that it's an area of investment. That's why I showed you this morning, right? We allow you to build HTML5 application in Windows 8, and that's actually the goal, right? Take the best from the web standards world. So without changing, we still keep working with W3C on standards, and couple that with some specific low-level APIs. In this case, it's called Windows 8, Windows RT. And then allow you to distribute it through the store and make money and get even to more users and provide a cleaner experience. So I think this is where probably we will be in a few years from now.
App Store versus web or versus browser. Anybody, or is that even a good question?
So
that's okay too.
Maybe the question should be reframed actually a little bit because I think right now we tend to associate native app versus web app when we think about App Store versus the web.
That's a really interesting point, so make sure they can hear it.
Right, so right now we tend to think of the App Store as native apps versus web apps. I don't think that's necessarily true. You can have an App Store for web apps. I think part of the appeal for a store is the distribution, right? You're an indie game, nobody knows about your site, how do you market this thing? You put it into an app store, you get on your top 10 list or whatever, and all of a sudden you've got a huge audience, right? So I think that's one of the propositions of an app store. And we have, at Google, we have the Chrome App Store, so you can actually package your web app as an app and deploy it like that, or extensions, so on and so forth. When we do talk about native versus web, personally, the way I think about it is, I still think about the web as maybe lagging behind, sort of like by 2 years in terms of capabilities. So there are, every week we see demos about like, look, here I just built this thing in HTML5 and CSS3 that you thought you could have never done before. Right? It's like I can capture video or display this, and it's like, well, that's cool. If you're on the edge and you really need to squeeze every ounce of performance out of your specific web app or that experience, perhaps native is the right answer. But I think a significant fraction of apps that are being built on native could be built as web apps and would probably be much better for it because they would have a wider audience and could be distributed amongst many different devices instead of being locked to a specific render. So Metro apps are a good example. Right? It's like, in theory, I should be able to run
great apps. Yes.
Yes. that in theory should
great
be
native apps. Yes.
But can you run a Metro app? Could I access it on my Chrome device?
It's called Windows, and Metro is one of the Metro apps. For example, I'll tell you. Okay. We are. I have a session actually now. I think it's in one of this room here. Where I'm going to.
You're just trying to escape.
Okay, I'm going to take action. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to show. I don't I'm going to talk about this specific element in the next session.
Okay, great. And then we need to do our traditional wrap-up by Peter, who is the godfather of this conference.
Thank you. Well, first of all, great to see everybody, and I think we had numbers of close to 2,000 people this year. Last year we had 1,200, so it's almost double, which would be great if the performance of HTML5 also doubled in 1 year, but we'll hopefully get there in 2-3 years. I think see all of you here every year because the interest in HTML5, and you can complain about JavaScript and different interoperability issues and performance issues, but at the end of the day, even though we've been bashing it for 10 years, it must serve a purpose, and I think it's because the web is interoperable. My closing comments are mostly about the mobile web today, and why I think it actually is even more critical than the web as we know it. The web, when it came along, as we knew it, lived in a world of an apps economy. For those who have been here during the PC era, there was an apps economy in the 1980s and 1990s. Those apps were shipped on CD-ROMs, and they were sent to people, and they would load them into personal computers. And then the web came along. And I would argue that the distribution model of apps in the era of PCs was so broken that the web was a fantastic alternative because it was real-time, there was no CDs, it was live, anywhere, connect to any app or web app or website. The challenge for the mobile web is very difficult because the mobile web is emerging at a time when the mobile apps economy, and we've talked about app stores, is alive, kicking, and relatively thriving. And actually the distribution model is electronic. So if you download an app from an app store, what's the problem? And I think the two perspectives on the mobile web, which are very, very different. The developer perspective on the apps economy in the mobile world is, if I want to kind of dynamically update my app with new data, new code, new information, I can't do it, right? Because it's a native piece of code. Now, maybe you could do some hybrid things where some pieces of it are HTML5, but at the end of the day, it's something that is sitting in an app store and I have to, even though it's nice, it's electronic, update it. And a web model is, you can A/B test, you can update, you can do everything in real time on the fly. You never have to worry about packaging, shipping to somebody, waiting for approval, and all that stuff, right? So the developer's view, which is most of you, is that the mobile web is far more attractive because you would be able to do all the things you do on desktop web and just build these amazing applications and do it in real time and optimize them. But let's switch to the user's perspective. The user is virtually loving apps. They are task-focused, they have beautiful user experiences, whether it's Instagram or whether it's a beautiful native game. They are available easily. You don't have to go to the mailbox and open a CD-ROM or whatever. So from a user's perspective, the mobile web is a step back unless it is truly phenomenal. From a user's perspective, not from the dev's perspective, right? So it's an interesting challenge because we as developers, to make the mobile web work, have to basically exceed the expectation of the user relative to a native app. Not just meet it, because if you just meet it, it's like, okay, I already got apps. So maybe this is what Frank was talking about. Things have to happen with mobile web apps, because the mobile web is a platform. HTML5 is a platform, and I think most of us who've been here in this business know that platforms only take off with a killer app of some kind. So my question as I leave you people today is, what is the killer app that will exceed the user's expectation on a mobile device relative to a beautiful native mobile app? That is the thing that will drive the mobile web. Everything else, it'll just be technology evolution, and users won't adopt it until that killer app comes around. Usually it's one or two of these apps that do it, So I'm curious to see if the audience here goes back by next year. We have that killer app in 1 year. Will we have that killer app in the next 5 years? But it will need to be something spectacular for this platform to take off on the mobile device. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We have 1 more hour and then some parties.